Angel Di María. If football was judged by highlight reels, Di María would have been Ballon d'Or top 3 multiple times. The man has cooked defenders in 3 different countries, scored in a Copa America final, an Olympic final, and a World Cup final. And yet somehow, when people talk about the best wingers of his era, they treat him like he was just a squad player in Ronaldo or Messi's shadow. The disrespect gets louder when you realise this guy was Real Madrid's best player in their 2014 Champions League final. Not Ronaldo, not Bale. It was Di María splitting defences like loose Velcro. He even got man of the match, only for Madrid to sell him right after like he was a spare part. Then at United, they gave him the number 7 shirt, stuck him in a mess of a squad, and blamed him when the whole thing collapsed. That stint made people forget just how good he really was. But everywhere else, Benfica, PSG, Juventus, Argentina, he's shown his class. He's not just flair and finesse. He runs more than half the midfielders, presses like a lunatic, and actually shows up in finals. Andrea Pirlo. Pirlo's name sounds fancy, and his game always looked smooth. But people still underestimate just how important he was. They remember the beard and the long balls. That sounded way differently in my head, but you get what I mean. Pirlo was more than that. He was the entire engine room disguised as a fashion icon. What made him special was that he didn't need to sprint. He didn't need to bark orders or throw himself into tackles. He stood there with his socks rolled low and ended careers with one pass. He could take the sting out of any game or crank it up with a diagonal switch that caught 3 defenders sleeping. If you gave him space, you were done. If you pressed him, he had already seen you coming 5 seconds ago. And this wasn't just in Italy. He ran the show for AC Milan when they were beating peak Manchester United and Liverpool in Europe. Then he went to Juventus and basically dragged the club back into dominance. And for the national team, he made that 2006 World Cup midfield tick like clockwork. Even late in his career, when he joined MLS, he still looked 2 steps ahead of everyone else. It's wild that he gets left out of best midfielders ever conversations because he wasn't flashy or loud. Thomas Müller. You know what's funny? If Thomas Müller had a different haircut and a few more tattoos, he'd be talked about like a football genius. Instead, he gets described with weird words like intelligent or functional, like he's an IKEA table. But Müller is one of the most efficient, awkward, unstoppable players football has ever seen. Müller doesn't play football like anyone else. He created his own role, literally, and it's called the Raumdeuter, or interpreter of space. He doesn't dribble past players. He just appears in the right spot always, like he's got cheat codes for positioning. He's Bayern Munich's all-time assist leader and has over 30 trophies. He won the World Cup, and yet people still act like he's clever, but not world-class. That's like saying a sniper is pretty accurate. Just because he doesn't have a flashy highlight reel or a million Instagram thirst traps doesn't mean he's not elite. And if he looked more like a playboy instead of a confused substitute teacher, people might finally give him the credit he deserves. David Villa. Spain's golden generation had a lot of stars. Xavi, Iniesta, Casillas, Ramos, and they all got the spotlight. But the guy who kept scoring when the lights were the brightest was David Villa. It was Villa who made Spain's tiki-taka actually result in goals. In Euro 2008, he scored 4 times and bagged the Golden Boot. In the 2010 World Cup, he scored 5. Without him, Spain's beautiful passing triangles would have looked like a possession drill. Villa turned build-up play into goals, and that matters more than people realise. What made him special was how he wasn't just hanging around waiting for tap-ins. He was constantly dragging defenders around, opening space, and scoring from anywhere. Even after his peak years, he still helped Atletico win the league when Barcelona and Real Madrid were stacked. Then he went to MLS and became an MVP. He should be talked about like Spain's all-time top forward because that's exactly what he is. Edinson Cavani. Cavani was the striker who never asked for attention but deserved a statue in every stadium he played in. Whether it was Napoli, PSG, or even his brief but brilliant run at Manchester United, Cavani was chaos with a purpose. And it was not just the goals, although he scored a ridiculous amount of those, but the way he played every minute like he was chasing rent money. But because he wasn't flashy or constantly posting on socials, he never got the global superstar tag. Even at PSG, when he was scoring like a man who was possessed, it was always about Ibrahimovic or Neymar or Mbappe. Cavani would break a club scoring record and people would go, "Oh yeah, he's still here." At Napoli, he was the main man. At United, he showed up with half the fan base unsure about him and ended up being their most brilliant forward in years. Everywhere he went, He scored, but more importantly, he worked. He pressed, dropped back, made unselfish runs, did the dirty work, and never complained. If football were graded on effort and goals combined, Cavani would be mentioned way more often, but he was too quiet, too focused on the pitch, and never bothered with PR. So now he gets remembered as just a solid striker, when he was actually one of the best forwards of his generation. Hey, if you've been enjoying this video so far, don't let it stop here. Like and subscribe so you have first-hand access to the videos as soon as they drop. Next up, we have Olivier Giroud. If you judged Olivier Giroud purely on memes, you'd think the guy was a walking punchline. But he's France's all-time leading goal scorer. That's right, more than Mbappe, more than Henry, even more than Benzema. Giroud scored overhead kicks, volleyed in tight spaces, and made target man football look like a chess match. But it's never been just about the goals. His link-up play was elite. Every team he joined looked better when he was leading the line. Even at Chelsea, when it looked like he was just there to be a backup, he still popped up with game-winning goals. And with France, he went from plan B to plan A real quick. People laughed when Deschamps kept picking him. Then France won the World Cup and made another final with Giroud up top, and suddenly nobody was laughing. Even Rakitić. People always talk about that legendary Barcelona midfield with Busquets, Xavi and Iniesta. But you know who actually started in the 2015 Champions League final with them? Ivan Rakitić. And he didn't just show up, he scored the opening goal. Rakitić was the glue guy, the one doing all the gritty stuff while Messi was painting masterpieces up front. He could pass, press, shoot, cover, and basically carry two people's workload without ever looking gassed. For Croatia, he was the perfect partner to Modric. When Modric had to play higher up or take over, Rakitić slid right in and balanced everything. During that 2018 World Cup run, he was everywhere. He was calm under pressure, was never rattled, and was somehow always in the right spot. He's never going to be the face of an era, and he probably doesn't care, but without Rakitić, a lot of winning teams wouldn't have worked the way they did. Giorgio Chiellini. You know how every team needs that one guy who looks like he'd headbutt a brick wall just to stop a counter-attack? That was Chiellini. Bro was an old-school defender through and through, with his shirt tucked halfway, nose already bleeding before kickoff, and eyes locked on whoever dared dribble near him. He wasn't trying to be elegant, because he just wanted to win. You'd see him go shoulder to shoulder with strikers and fold them like chairs. But he wasn't just physical, he was smart. His reading of the game was elite, especially the way he'd sniff out passes before they happened, track movement like a machine, and still organise the backline. With Juventus, he was the heartbeat of a defence that dominated Serie A for a decade, and with Italy, he helped drag them to a Euro title when people thought they were cooked. He never went viral for nutmegs or 50-yard assists. But if you're building a defence that actually wins things, Chiellini's one of the first names on the board. Michael Carrick. Carrick was one of those players you don't really appreciate until you re-watch the game and go, wait, how did he touch the ball that many times without messing up once? He didn't score screamers or go flying into challenges, but he controlled the tempo well. At Manchester United, he came right after the Roy Keane era, but was just as valuable. Carrick wasn't trying to dominate you physically, he just took the ball, passed it perfectly, recycled possession, and made sure the chaos around him never touched him. He was key to multiple Premier League titles, a Champions League win, and that midfield didn't fully click without him. Ask Scholes or Ferdinand, they'll tell you Carrick made everything easier. But because he wasn't shouting on the pitch or dancing past defenders, he never got the spotlight. England never quite knew what to do with him either. But real football fans, especially United fans, saw what he brought. He was the system before people even started using that word in analysis. Diego Milito. When people talk about the greatest one-season performances ever, Diego Milito's 2009 to 2010 run should be right up there. He scored the winner in the Serie A title decider, scored both goals in the Coppa Italia final, and then scored 2 goals in the Champions League final to seal the treble for Inter Milan. That's not a clutch moment, that's a clutch trilogy. His movement was sharp, his finishing was ruthless, and his composure in front of the goal was scary. It felt like he waited for goalkeepers to panic, then rolled the ball in like he was doing a training drill. And yet, the man barely gets mentioned when people talk about great strikers. He didn't hang around in the spotlight, didn't get big endorsement deals, and he played during a time when Messi, Ronaldo, and Zlatan were soaking up most of the oxygen. But that doesn't take anything away from what he did. You carry a team to a treble with match-winning performances in all 3 finals, and people still sleep on you? That's peak underrated. So yeah, next time someone's speaking about all-time greats and forgets names like Müller, Di Maria or Pirlo, pause them and ask if they've ever watched football with their eyes open. Because hype is loud, but legacy doesn't need a spotlight. And if you're still here, you're officially not one of those fans who only watches highlight reels and Ballon d'Or speeches. So hit that like button, Drop your own underrated players in the comments and subscribe, because over here, we talk about football the way it's supposed to be.